everybody. Welcome back to the living room. Thank you all for coming. We're really excited about tonight, as we are about every living room that we have. There was a little disruption in scheduling. Is that me? Due to the holiday and anyway, we were supposed to have this meeting back in December. Fortunately, we had our holiday party, which I think was fantastic. Thank you to those of you who were able to be here. Tonight we're doing the patient panel. This, for me, is one of the most important meetings we'll have. Not just because of all the amazing things that I know these wonderful people have to say, but because of the tool that we will have after they've said it, to use it to push out to all the people who really, really, really need to hear the patient voice. So I think you'll agree with me that well, you say it all the time, the patient voice is
the most important voice out there.
And the one least often heard, right? So one of our big purposes tonight was, what is the role of the patient and the caregiver and, and loved ones of the patients, and how can we really work together to help move the needle forward to achieve our goal of making lung cancer a chronically managed disease. So thank you all for tuning in tonight, those of you who are watching through Ustream, through the live stream, and thank you to all of those of you who are in the room. Most of you will recognize the people on our panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves for those who either are in the room who have not been in the room to meet them, and for those of you who are watching online. So you can get a little brief history on who they are and why they're here. And then we'll just run through the line, do the introductions, and then we will start back with my mom and I going through some questions. And then audience participation required, please. So if there are any questions you have about anything that these patients and Jim, the caregiver, who so graciously agreed to be on our panel, please don't hesitate to ask questions during the program.
Can I add just one thing? This is the second part of a three-part series. After our gala in November, we invited several doctors down. We had David Joblons, we had Andrew Allen, who is the CEO of Clovis, who has a trial out there right now for people that progress on EGFR, and several other amazing doctors. So we wanted to bring doctors in for phase 1, patients in for phase 2, and next month we're bringing in other foundations. So we have Longevity and Lung Cancer Foundation of America and some other foundations, because we believe 1,000% in collaboration, and that if we bring patients, foundations, and physicians and researchers together, we're going to advance much quicker and come up with cures much faster. So our patients are second, but not necessarily second in importance. We think they're number 1.
So Liz, do you want to start with you and just give a brief shout out who you are and your quick little story? Sure.
We'll just tell our stories first.
We'll go around and then we'll come back to questions, because you guys are.
So because we want to hear your voices about solutions as well. So.
Well, my name's Elizabeth Lacasia. I was diagnosed in 2007. I have bronchoalveolar carcinoma, stage 4. I've had 2 surgeries, initially lower left lobe and second wedge resection. I participated in a number of clinical trials. We'll be talking more about that tonight. Things were looking pretty dire, so I had molecular genetic testing done, and I went up to, and I got a second opinion up at UC Davis. And we decided to do, okay, pull it closer, sure, sorry. And we decided to do a Hail Mary, because unfortunately my molecular genetic testing showed that I was wild type, but my oncologist had experience with patients with BAC before, and so he said that the subpopulation of patients respond. Within about a month, we started seeing response. As of this point, I am a complete response. I just passed my 4-year mark, and I'm currently still on treatment of a Alimta and Tarceva combination, but now I'm just on Tarceva. So hopefully that trend will continue for a very long period of time.
I'm Jim Girand, and as you look at this group up here, I'm often reminded of the story of ham and eggs, where the pig was committed and the chicken was involved. Well, I'm the chicken in this group here, so I stand in great admiration of my fellow panel members here, believe me. Nita, my wife, was diagnosed about almost 5 years ago now, and totally devastating news that there's nothing good you can say out of getting lung cancer, and it's complicated, it's dire, and the difficulty was just couldn't have been more pronounced. And fortunately, we have our family, our 3 daughters, Laurie, Lisa, and Nita, and we all rallied around. And I'll have more to tell you about that story, but that's my role as a caregiver.
Hi, I'm Sally, and I put myself into,
Closer, Sally.
I put myself, or signed up to be part of an early detection program. I was at high risk. I hate to admit it, but I smoked for 30 years, and I had quit 20 years before my cancer was found, but it ran in my family as well. My mother had it, her brother had it, my paternal grandfather had it. And when this was first told to me by actually a doctor acquaintance that there was this study, I said, well, why do I want to know if I have lung cancer? I thought, why would I do that? And I thought about it, and I thought, heck, if I can be found early, it's well worth it. And so I put myself into the international, it was called ILCAP, it's International Early Lung Cancer Action Program, and they had found little nodules in my lobes, and they weren't at all concerned about it. And after 5 years, one of them tripled. I was getting screening every year with low-dose not radiation, low-dose CAT scan. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. Low-dose CAT scan, and in the 5th year, one of them had tripled in size, but it was still small, but it was there. And I've been warned that these could be false positives. When you signed up for the program, if you were eligible, they warned you of the false positives, but mine didn't turn out to be false. I had surgery in March of 2009, and luckily it was stage 1. It was confined just to the tumor in my lower right lobe, and that was removed. And I'm watched very carefully because I have nodules in all the other lobes and ground glass, and I'm going to have my 5-year scans in a couple of weeks, and I expect them to come out just as great as the others have been. And I call the day of my surgery the celebration of my life day. And because had I not gone into this study, who knows by the time my lung cancer would have been found, what stage I would have been at, if it had been found in time for anything. So I'm a big proponent of early detection and getting scans if you're at all in risk.
Jennifer, you want to pull your mic, all of you, if you pull your mics up a little bit closer, I think that would be great.
No, we're going to do it when we come back to you.
Okay. I'm Jennifer Glass. I was diagnosed almost exactly a year ago, January 5th last year. And as many of you know, this was 4 months after getting married to Harlan, who's here tonight. So it was a huge blow to us. It was originally diagnosed as stage 4, and then they retracted to 3B, but it was a spread that was a tumor on my upper part of my left lung that had spread up to my neck and throat, so inoperable because of that. So last spring I went through 8 weeks of chemo and radiation, cisplatin and etoposide, the chemo, and now I'm on Tarceva, which many of you here know I had a really rough ride with for the first couple of months, and now I'm on an even keel with that. And I've had 2 clean scans that show the cancer is not gone, but it is not growing, so it's maintained. And so the combination seems to be working, and it's quarter by quarter, but we're optimistic, cautiously optimistic.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Neil Schiffman. I'm 65 years old, and I was just thinking that I was diagnosed 31 months ago, which I kind of find hard to believe that it's been so long. I'm glad it's been so long. I didn't expect it, both the disease, and especially when I was told that I had it. It was the last of the cancers that I would expect for being a long-distance endurance athlete who uses his lungs to their absolute fullest, whether at 0 altitude or as high as 14,000+ feet through races and training, etc. So in June of 2011, I was diagnosed, and that was like getting hit with a hammer, although it was good to know what was going on with my body because I really didn't know exactly for a couple of months before that time. My course of treatment in a short time became a biopsy, which was necessary to determine the type of cancer or lung cancer that I had. And fortunately, I live in this area, so it really is the standard of care for most of the institutions around here, but still is not the standard of care throughout most of this country for many different reasons. But I did have the biopsy. I learned that I had the EGFR mutation, so I had to study about that, learn about that, find out what the possible treatments were. And on July 14th, 2011, I, along with many others here who have done it, started Tarceva and had 13 wonderful months. But unfortunately, all good things must end. And after that period of time, and it really brought me back to a great position, I started to relapse a little, started to show some progression. So it became, what's the next treatment? And every doctor visit that I have had since the beginning, we discuss what's the next possibilities? Where are we going? What's plan B, C, and my doctor says there are 26 letters in the alphabet, got a long way to go. We haven't used up too many of them. Well, we went to IV chemo for 5 or 6 months, which didn't exactly thrill me. In retrospect, great experience because it's in the past, but I could avoid that in the future, it'd be okay. All during that time, though, and even when I was on Tarceva, I made it a point to look what are the possibilities for the future. And I honed in on clinical trials because I wanted to know what is currently being done to help me and all of us potentially in the future. I kept my eye on a few different trials, and after 5 or 6 months on the IV chemo, I knew it was time to get off it because I wasn't feeling so great. I could still do some exercise, but not at the level I wanted to do it at, and I just wasn't feeling so well. So it was time to look at more carefully a clinical trial. In my case, it turned out that I needed to have another biopsy to participate in that trial, and biopsy for that meant invasive. It was done. I had both the EGFR and now the T790M mutation, and which helped me become part of that trial. It was done by Clovis Oncology, and I hit the triple factor because not only was it done by a company that's local, not only was it done at Stanford University, so it makes it a lot easier to get to, the person running the trial was my own doctor. Now, that is a rare situation to have when you can have it local and have everything aligned for you. You're very fortunate in that case there. So for almost all of 2013, I participated in that trial. And by the end of 2013, I knew things were changing, and I had gone through numerous dose escalations, et cetera. And because each time I went to visit my doctor, we did talk about the future. Well, the future came a little sooner than I expected it to, because on December 19th, it was time to make a change. I had passed the point in progression. I could no longer be the Clovis Oncology Hope to Be superstar, and that trial was over for me. So there were numerous possibilities that we had already discussed in the past, and now again, the future was now. So on December 20th, I decided to go back to Old Reliable to see what I could do with that. So hello, Tarceva. And so I am now one of you out there who are taking it. Elizabeth, I know you've been on it a long time, and Joe's been on it, is on it now, and some others also are on it. For me, it will be a bridge towards something else in the near term, as I know it will not last as long as I would hope that it will be, but that's where I am. And I'll talk a little bit more about clinical trials and my passion for it as we go further on.
Great. Great, thank you, Neil. So I want to go back and start with Sally, because I think for a lot of people out there and for a lot of you in the room, the question of early detection comes up, right? Whether it be for your family members or people you know and what they should know about the process and what it means. So with Sally having been through ILCAP, which was really the only early detection option available when she went through it, since then the National Lung Cancer Screening Trial has finally, the data's come out of it, and it has shown that yes, CT scans are more beneficial than an X-ray in detecting early lung cancer. But I want Sally to kind of explain the process, and I guess I should start. You said something, and it happens to be a question that I wanted to ask about the concern about the screening and the what if they find something, because I know there's people out there who feel the same way, and when we discuss early detection and the process, they're like, well, what if they find something? Right? So walk us a little bit through that thought process for you and how you got past it.
Well, at first, as I said, I thought, why the heck would I want to know if I'm going to have lung cancer? Then I thought about my mother. My mother had it 3 times over a period of 22 years. Obviously, things were done differently in her day, but she never needed any chemo or radiation, and she was able to live a pretty active life. The 3rd time, she was 86, and that she was too weak at that point. But she lived 20 some odd years with being I shouldn't say cancer-free, because it did come back, but there were no metastasis or anything. And I thought, if I can be found and be that lucky, then I want to do it. I had no symptoms, and I just knew that with my family background and my having smoked all those years, and I hate to even bring that up because we don't like that stigma, but if I'm going to be truthful, that was a part of my life.
Right.
Would you recommend early detection?
Oh, do I?
CT?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
As I said, I had no symptoms, so a lot of people have coughs or they think they have asthma or all these other things. I had nothing. So had I not been in that program, as I say, by the time it might have been found, I might have been stage 4, or there might have been nothing anyone could do. And so I recommend it highly.
And this is a beginning for early detection for lung cancer. And there are there's a lot of research going on out there now using blood and various different ways to detect lung cancer early. But in those days, there was a real pioneer, and her name was Dr. Claudia Hinchke from Weill Cornell. And she actually started the ILCAP screening trials. And, she really didn't get a whole lot of help from the lung cancer industry. It was poo-pooed and not supported well. And it's just been recently, in this last year, that the NSLT results came out saying that, yes, we can catch this disease early. This is one, and we're hoping for many other early detection programs coming out in the near future. But it's just a beginning, and it's a good thing.
I'd like to add one thing to that. I was doing it through Mills Peninsula Hospital here, because initially it was going to be done through UCSF, and then that kind of fell through, and when I found out about it again, it was at Mills Peninsula, and they weren't going to have the funding to do it after X number of years. So they said any of us in the program could get our doctor to write a prescription, so to speak, to have the test done, and they would charge us just what they charge insurance. So I went to my doctor. I happened to be sick, and I went, which had nothing to do with lung cancer. And I was there, and I said, oh, by the way, I need you to write a prescription. He said, oh, no, I don't want you to have any more radiation. And I wasn't feeling well. I didn't argue with him, but I had to go back the next week. And I said, I'm going to argue with you about this, because I would rather chance having a little extra radiation and have something found early than say, I don't want you to have that, and again, not have it found. And he apologized to me and he said, I didn't think about it in the terms that you were. So you have to stand up for yourself.
There you go. Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
So the process itself, Sally, when you made the choice to enter the study, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, from setting up the appointment, from the CT scan, what happened next? Can you kind of walk us through that?
My first visit to where the test was being done, they got a little bit of my background. And then I had the low-dose CAT scan. And then I was sent a copy of the results as well as my doctor. And of course, I'm reading this stuff and I'm seeing nodules. Oh my God, I panicked. And not one, but quite a few, and they really are in all the lobes. But so I went straight to my own, I called them first, and they told me not to worry, that they were going to be monitoring these, that as you get older, number one, you get nodules in all parts of your body.
Because they could be just scar tissue.
Right, or
You know,
it
they
could be scar tissue.
nothing.
I'd had pneumonia a few times in my life, but then I still was nervous, even though they tried to calm me down. I went to see my internist at the time, and she went through the whole thing with me and reassured me, and she said, you're going to be watched. And I was. So after that first reading of that, which sometimes reading your reports can be scary when you don't know what you're reading, after that, I really never worried about it. But I have to be honest, when they called and told me I had a nodule that grew and that they felt it was malignant and that I needed to have a PET scan and so forth, they said, my comment was, I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised. I think because my family, so many members had it, I wasn't surprised I had it, but I was shocked to actually be told I may well have it.
Oh, it's the wrong one. Yeah. Thanks, Sally. Does anybody have any questions about CT, or does anybody have family members that have asked about early screening, or no?
I was just curious.
Oops.
Was your mother?
We need your mic.
I was just curious, was your mother a smoker?
Yes, unfortunately, my whole family was.
Okay.
But in talking to some doctors, I've been told that, and my mother was told that hers was not caused by smoking. Now, I don't know what they knew in the 70s and 80s that they could have said that. But I've also had other doctors tell me that what we all in my family have had wasn't necessarily from smoking. So I don't know.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. One of the criteria for being eligible for the screening program is smoking.
Right.
But one of the other criteria is a family history, and they aren't necessarily, exchangeable. So
Well,
it could be one or the other.
And I think it's important to point out, and I'm going to say some things that I don't have the answers to, but they are definitely questions that really no one can give me definitive answers to, because there's still so little known about this disease. But when you look based on sheer statistics alone, small cell lung cancer, for example, has a definitive tie back to smoking. Non-small cell, not so much, right? And I look at yet non-small cell is the most commonly diagnosed lung cancer out there. And then when you take it even a step further and you look at incidence statistics and you say, okay, and this is a worldwide statistic, but it's interesting nonetheless, that 20% of all smokers worldwide will get lung cancer, okay? Only 20%. That's actually not a very...
80% don't.
Don't. 80% of smokers worldwide will get heart disease of some sort, whether it's emphysema or COPD or some sort of heart disease. But not lung cancer. So there's still so much to be learned about that. Now, that's not saying that we promote smoking's bad for a whole lot of reasons. The biggest issue we have with it is its direct link back to the lung cancer patient, and how somehow it's a blame shame.
Well,
thing.
the real issue is that the only disease that's been singled out as a smoking-caused disease is lung cancer. But we know that more people that smoke, more people with heart disease die than people with lung cancer. More people with vascular disease die than people do with lung cancer. And smoking is the cause of 11 other cancers and COPD and emphysema and 1,000 other things. So the bottom line is that it's really wrong for one disease to be singled out, and we all are proponents that smoking is not a good thing in any way, shape, or form, and ultimately it's going to hurt your longevity in a big way, but it's wrong, and we need to get past that because the funding for research for lung cancer is dismally low. But we don't want to belabor on that point too long because, Elizabeth, you just spoke at a major meeting. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You know, where did you speak and how was that received?
Sure. I spoke at a pharmaceutical company called Bristol Myers Squibb, and this was about 9 months ago, and about 250 people were in attendance, and they were all across the board of senior management, clinicians, researchers, administrators, development, people from all across many different areas within Bristol Myers Squibb. And it was really a first time they'd ever done anything like this, and quite honestly, it was the impetus was because of Bonnie and her persuasive skills, and she convinced them that patient advocacy was a good thing. And Bristol Myers Squibb is one of the more traditional companies, and just as a side note, I used to be a pharmaceutical representative for them, and I also worked in biotech for several oncology firms. And so it gave me kind of a unique perspective, being not only a patient, unfortunately, but also being on the other side where I was also selling the products as well as working on the products strategically. So when Bonnie asked me to speak, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity because there were a number of different types of audiences there that I felt could really impact. And do you want me to go ahead and talk about this? I think patient advocacy is really coming into the forefront as far as industry, and there's a number of reasons for that. Historically, industry is kind of, and when I say industry, I mean the biotech pharmaceutical, more so pharmaceutical because it's more traditional, has not really paid a lot of attention to the patient because historically they really haven't had a lot of decision-making power. So there's a lot of changes that are going on, but with this particular pharmacy, I don't know what you call it. Involvement. There's a number of challenges that really face the patients having a voice. And I think that now is really just a time where that's really coming into it because historically they've had huge financial motivations. Obviously, they have their shareholders who are really motivated by the bottom line. They have very large investments, hundreds of millions of dollars that they put into their pipelines. And their timelines for development are very long. You know, you talk about software, you're talking about, months. You're talking tens of years sometimes for pharmaceuticals. And so they really have to look far in the future and try to figure out what is the market going to look like when this product is going to be coming on the market. And really, a lot of their focus has really been on, physicians, unfortunately, insurance companies, HMOs, because these are really the decision makers and the determinants of the treatments. Standard of care really is defined by published clinical trials, and sometimes these clinical trials take 5 years, 7 years before the data comes out. And so you may have something showing very promising, but we know with lung cancer especially, standard of care is 15%. Hopefully it's inching up a little bit, but standard of care just isn't effective right now. And fortunately, industry is really starting to understand that this paradigm is really changing. And so I think patient participation and advocacy like Bonnie, like all of us really, if we can make a real effect of making our voices heard, because I think the key factor here that is honestly making the pharmaceutical companies sit up and take notice are a number of things, but I think the key factor is us as individuals are simply demanding that treatment be done in our best interest. And so we're much more involved. We're doing research. We're asking questions. We're going to the doctors. I've heard about this particular drug. I've heard about this clinical trial. These sort of things. It's not so much, yes, doctor, whatever you say, doctor, and you undergoing this thing without answering any questions. A lot of times the doctors are coming in and they're feeling like, you know, they really have to defend themselves. And that's a really good thing, because we get quality of care that way. Because if we just are passive about it, we just get standard of care, which really isn't acceptable, quite honestly. And I'm just speaking from my own heartfelt experience, but honestly, you know, 15% just is not good enough. So I think this opportunity gave me the chance to really speak and not only tell my story and bring it home to them about who they were treating, because a lot of these people never see patients. They never really hear the patient's side. They're always thinking about, well, you know, 10 years from now, financially, should we do this? You know, not thinking about, okay, the patient has to come in, you know, if this is, you know, 4 times a day, if it's an infusion versus a pill, you know, all these sort of things, side effects, whereas if they hear from a patient saying, you know, gosh, if you made this into a pill versus an injection, I'd be much more likely to take your drug. Or, you know, if you were combining your drug with this other drug that I think is, you know, showing more promise, I'd be more likely to participate in your clinical trial. And so I think these are really where the paradigm is changing. You know, because, and Neil is going to talk about this in the future, is that the paradigm for them has really shifted, and there's a number of reasons for that. The big blockbuster drugs that used to that really made it for pharmaceutical companies, it's just not happening anymore. You know, it's very expensive, and they have to really invest their money wisely. So they're really being more selective about the drugs that they put their money into. So that's a key factor. Clinical trials are an absolute critical part of pharmaceutical companies and biotechs getting approval for their drugs. Well, if they can't get patients participating, and right now they're only having 4%, how are they going to get their drug tested beyond the mice, beyond the dogs, whatever else they're doing the treatments on? Their drug is getting slowed down. And sometimes some of these companies are going overseas. But if they understand what motivates us as patients to participate in these clinical trials, it's going to make a huge difference. Because, again, standard of care isn't too exciting. And so if I have a possibility of trying a new drug or standard of care, I want to go for that new drug, especially if it's showing promise. But they also have to make it a little bit more available. So in other words, having clinical trial sites, maybe smaller ones, and having more of them.
You know, that's a good point. That's a good point, Elizabeth. So, Neil, I'm going to ask you this, because you made a comment a minute ago saying that really on this major peninsula, we have UC Davis up in Davis. We have UCSF in San Francisco and multiple sites. We have Stanford, you know, 15 miles from here. You know, and LA is not all that far. You can go down to San Diego. I mean, we have, you know, I think a huge percentage of the major teaching hospitals are in California. So all that being said, and to what Elizabeth said, if we had more community hospitals involved in clinical trials, I think we could increase that 4% by leaps and bounds. Mm-hmm. So Neil, could you kind of speak to that, but also speak to what is in your wildest dreams? What's your most amazing clinical trial you think you could be in?
Yeah, one that cures all of us. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's a good.
Maybe it's out there in someone's mind, but it takes 15 to 20 years from concept, developing some protocol, to developing a trial, to getting all of the appropriate people that are going to be running it, to the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, FDA, et cetera, and even with the breakthrough designation that some drugs are getting, so it knocks it down by a few years. But first, may I say to my 4 friends on the panel, thanks for being up here. It's nice to have friends with you. So thanks for being around. And let me talk generally about clinical trials, and I'll give you some ideas when we talked about the regionalization or the localization of trials to make them more available to a lot of people. But first, what is a clinical trial? So I decided to look up, do a little research on it, and see exactly what it says in a lot of different areas. And it's a study done and conducted with patients like all of us who are patients, or unfortunately may be patients in the future. And it's to evaluate a new treatment and answer some specific questions. It has a very specific protocol which has to be followed, which I found out about when I went to my trial company and gave them all these ideas of how they could instantly change it and make it better for me and all the other patients. I thought that by the next cycle in a few weeks, that would happen. Well, it doesn't quite happen that quickly. They've developed this protocol. It may not be correct, but they have this protocol that they have to follow. The trials also are conducted by a team of people who are going to oversee your participation, my participation in it. In the case of Stanford or UCSF or Davis, so they have translational labs where you go. There are a number of professional people that will attend to you, whether it be a couple of hours that you're there, 10 or 12 hours that some of us have spent there, and trying to figure out what we're going to do during that time, because we're going to be poked and prodded and EKG'd and given pills and IVs, everything else, and maybe have a little free time. For me, means get on the bike, to their astonishment. But maybe for somebody else it's something very different. But you may ask, why are they important and how long are they? Well, why are they important? I just brought an empty bottle with me, and some of you are very familiar with what I call T150, so the Tarceva bottle. 10 years ago, it got approval. For a number of years before that, patients similar to us participated in a clinical trial at the beginning of which the information showed that it probably wasn't going to be very effective. But somehow, and for various reasons, certain questions were asked, some people responded very well to Tarceva. And because of that, the protocol was changed, and it's become the drug of choice for many thoracic oncologists if you have certain mutations, and even if you don't. Exactly. And many times, it's been found to be a positive effect for some period of time. Mm-hmm. So there's no specific test that's been determined that can rule it out completely, and there's no test that can say 100% of the time it'll work. It can just give you 80% of the time it'll probably be effective, and 5 or 10 or 15% of the time for people who don't have certain things. But those are things that are found out in these clinical trials. Clinical trials can last a very short period of time because people can have adverse effects, and in a month or 2 months, that trial may end. A lot of money's been spent on it. Your hopes are riding on it, and then they're dashed. It may have nothing to do with you. It could be the design of the study. It could be the doses that was given to people, or a whole host of other reasons. But if it goes well, it still will take a long time. Phase 1 of the trial that I was on still goes on, and it's 2 years on the line, and they're just now getting to the point to determine what the maximum dosage is. Why is that important? Because that becomes the standard to use in phase 2. The problem for some people in clinical trials is, even if you've done your homework and you've found one that you like, and it's at the University of Colorado in Aurora, and you've made all the arrangements and everything is fine, and you go there, you say, I think this is really important, that this can help me. It's not the end of the line, but I think it's a good step for me to take. You may go there, take the medication, however it may be administered, and in a short period of time, find out it has no value whatsoever to you. Unfortunately, somebody has to be first in all of these trials. Somebody was first in Tarceva, and they started off at such a low dose that even though they may have had the mutation, they never had the opportunity to get the benefit. So early on, a lot of people get disqualified from trials because it hasn't shown any efficacy. The trial may continue. Other people will be enrolled in different cohorts. The dosage will be escalated, and maybe that company and maybe that patient will be lucky enough that the number that they hit when they started shows some efficacy. It's why I waited a year before getting on the trial, because I know retrospectively that had I started at the beginning, it would not have worked as it did not for all the people who started. It's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing to do. Somebody has to be first, and it means something that could benefit you in the future may not, just because of that situation, besides everything else that's going on in your body.
But you do recommend clinical trials for patients?
Oh, I absolutely do. Besides being a very active patient advocate, and some of us are patient advocates because we want to be, and some of us are patient advocates because we have to be, because it's in our genes, and somehow having lung cancer has awoken that specific gene at the same time that it gave us cancer. It makes us do things that maybe we weren't so fast to do a little while ago. But absolutely, I think it's extraordinarily important that whatever treatment that you're on, if it has stabilized you so that you feel well enough to spend a little time, first on your own, looking at clinicaltrials.gov, which is the database for all clinical trials in the United States. And then you go through the matrix. You put in non-small cell lung cancer, and you hone it down. And then you also look at different institutions that are around here. They list all of their clinical trials. They list all their inclusion and exclusion criteria. Right now, inclusion criteria starts with you have to be in excellent health except you have lung cancer.
That's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
You know, Elizabeth knows because she was in the industry. You know, these mostly are public companies and some private, but want to make a lot of money at some point, that are driven by the profit motive in addition to being altruistic. They want to try to be successful at all regards in their trial. Well, how best to do it? By trying to have people who will not hurt the trial effect by having some other malady. If they have those type of adverse reactions and adverse effects, the trial may end due to no problem with the medication that was being administered, but for some other reason. No company wants to deal with that. There are numerous side effects that you have to think about when you do the clinical trial. You know, more and more, medicine is getting better, so there are many anti-nausea drugs available. It's like taking one drug, hoping it'll offset another drug, and hoping the first drug you take, that's the clinical trial, is going to work on you. You really don't know what it's doing inside. You have scans every once in a while, and if it gets better, is it really because the medication I'm taking is making it better, or is it something else? That's yet to be determined by all of the other people in the study and what the data comes out with on phase 1, phase 2, and hopefully to phase 3, and it gets approved in that part there.
So Neil, would your ultimate amazing clinical trial be less rigid? Would it be something that says, okay, Neil, you were in the Clovis trial and you had some brain mets, so that disqualified you. So maybe you go into a subset that says, okay, we already know that this certain drug doesn't break the brain barrier, but it still might push back your cancer in your body. Would subsets of clinical trials, so you weren't like off the trial, you got to stay on it in some way where the trial wasn't canceled?
Yeah. So Neil and I had a conversation the other day about something similar, but And I'm hoping this ties into how you started this with saying, oh, this is how I would like to see a clinical trial.
Right. So, yeah, let me answer a couple of parts of that. First, I think, yes, the subsetting of any of the trials brings forth, just like it did with Tarceva, the potential that any of these drugs may fit a small sliver of patients and become efficacious for them, and by being so, may come out with a positive result so that the company can sell the drug, make their money, and again, be altruistic and provide a service to all the people now and in the future with that drug. Another part of the same thing in breaking it down is, and you had mentioned earlier about community hospitals and other centers. Now, for most people who do a trial, in my case it was Clovis, they had 5 locations in the United States. If you weren't near there, you had to get yourself there. I posit to you that a better way of doing a trial is to do something similar to what's done with orphan cancers, where there will never be enough people in one area to come up with the number that's needed to do a trial. So in those cases, many different facilities participate. In the case of the Clovis or a Genentech trial, there are some hurdles to overcome, but they're not insurmountable, so that person who lives in or near Boise, Idaho, who would have had to come to Stanford to get treatment, can go to a translational lab that's available in Boise and participate just as easily as I went to Stanford, or some of you have gone to Davis and other locations. If we want people to participate in clinical trials, we have to make the obstacles as low to the ground as possible.
There you go.
And eliminate them where we can. And we have to, and I'm going to put on patient advocacy hat a little bit, we have to be forthright in what we want to see. We have to, in my opinion, approach trial companies and talk with them about what they're doing with their trial. Most think that that's a no-no. Many of us don't ask questions, myself not included, of our doctors and other people, but we do have to, in my opinion. So whether it's a phase 1 trial, phase 2, the company may not know you other than a number, but that doesn't mean you can't approach them and you can't get approval from your institutions and your doctors to talk with them, because most of these companies really do want to hear from the people. They have to achieve success, or that company may not exist in a couple of years. And how better to help them and increase that 4% of just people going to trials by making it far more welcoming for the patient. So the patient is not just the object of the study, but really is the subject and is involved in all aspects of things.
And to Neil's point early on, it's really, really important for patients to know that if they participate in a clinical trial, they could be getting a drug very, very early before it gets on the market, sometimes 10 years before it gets on the market, and actually have a positive result. We need to move to Jennifer now, because the point of our meeting is to talk about what patients can do to escalate a cure, either chronically managed lung cancer or a cure. The major institutions are involved, pharma's involved. We need to get the patients involved, because that's the missing link. So,
And
Jennifer.
Before we move to Jennifer, I just want Rocky to queue up, because we have a little intro for Jennifer. And
Okay.
while
Right.
Rocky's queuing up, I just want to say, I want to just kind of piggyback on what you just said, and why, the whole purpose for this meeting, for everybody who's watching online, everybody who's in the room, and everyone who will see this moving forward, it is so important. And we talk about gaps all the time, like where are the gaps? Is it in pulmonology? Is it in pathology? Is it, we talk about the science behind it and the physicians and who's not doing what and who could be doing it better. Well, we have to include ourselves, not only some of you as patients, but the rest of us as advocates, in what can we be doing better? And that is the purpose of this, because we have the power to move these things along a lot faster than the bureaucracy of some of the things that are blocking us from getting there. So I think it's why it's so important that we create the Army that we started talking about in September, you know?
Well, and to Danielle's point, most of these doctors, and I'm going to say most because we happen to know 2 that have actually developed this disease themselves, and they had a whole different opinion of how things should be done once they had lung cancer, but most have not. So, do you develop a Twinkie and you just put it out on the market? Or do you test the market first to see if the market actually is going to like the Twinkie? And that's a very small analogy to what this is. But these clinicians and researchers have never been in a clinical trial, so they really don't know what the patients want out of a clinical trial. And the patients want a drug that possibly is going to help them. And they want to be able to stay in the trial if they're showing progress, for X amount of time. So patients need to be involved in the solution. Yeah. They need to help at the bottom and help build the trial. So it's something that they can tolerate and participate in.
I think that's a really key factor right there, because working in industry myself, and especially working with biotechs, you sometimes see the CEOs actually be guys that are really hot on research. And they are so interested in this minutia, sometimes that may seem very interesting to them, but really isn't a mainstream sort of thing as far as finding a cure or making their drug effective. They just want to kind of see it just because it's an interesting thing. And so sometimes you need people that are on the front lines, like patient advocates, or even the clinicians are so sometimes far away from the doctors or the patients dealing with these sort of things. It's like, I remember working, because I was working in the strategic side of the product strategy, and saying to them, we need to have the trials hit these endpoints, because these are the endpoints the doctors are looking for. This is really sexy and interesting, and it'll be interesting to write an article about this, but this shouldn't be what these trials are trying to prove. And so even for a number of companies that I've seen, whether I worked for them and also people that I knew, it was surprising that these endpoints, because these people were research-oriented in the senior management, they kind of need to understand, look, I'm going to be taking your drug, and I need you to, I want it to be efficacious. I want it something that I can, be able to take it. I don't want something that's frozen and it has to be defrosted and given 4 times a day or whatever. If you can possibly make it into a pill, or just an infusion lasts a month versus 12 days or things like this. And sometimes they don't always think about those sort of things. And that's why I think people like Bonnie have such a key role in trying to play a part, as well as us, hopefully, more and more of us, developing that army, becoming patient advocates and trying to kind of bring things down to the reality of these companies that are thinking 15 years down the line of, hey, somebody's going to have to take this drug, or this doctor's going to have to administer this, or you have to get to the hospital. The pragmatic side of actually getting this bloody stuff in your arm. And sometimes the companies don't always think about that.
Right.
And so, even with the molecular and genetic testing, things like Foundation doing the genetic sequencing, this is something that the pharmaceutical companies should be thinking about, because it's a win-win both for the patients and for the pharmaceutical companies, because they have a better idea whether this drug that they think works in a certain capacity will actually work for that patient, versus just getting patients with non-small cell lung cancer and hoping that it's going to work. Whereas the patient has a better understanding of, okay, the probability of these 5 drugs working for me are much better than the whole standard of care traditional thing that they usually throw at you first time. So I think it's something that is so key, that having more information along these lines is so critical, and we need to carry out the message and say, look, I don't want to be a guinea pig. If there's a way that we can kind of find out, increase the probability that something's going to work up front instead of stage 4, you know, three treatments down the line, then we're going to do this. Let's just do this up front.
I agree.
So those are the kind of messages that
Yeah. So the point was, you know, for everybody today to bring something to the table to show what patients can do to be participatory in the cure, and knowing that they are the key to, you know, the famous pie charts that everybody has. This is the final wedge that needs to be in the pie chart to advance lung cancer.
Right.
So Jennifer's expertise.
Power of the internet is sort of what Jennifer can bring to the table, and
She's a guru in social media.
And I think most of you have seen the video. I know I've sent it out and we've linked to it, but we're going to play it right now, so some people online who are watching who may not have seen it get a chance to see it, and it's one example of how impactful the internet can be. So, Rocky.
In January of this year, I was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. You can't anticipate how you're going to react to news like this. But in my case, I stayed calm. This led friends and family to say to me, Jennifer, you're fearless in the face of this thing. But of course I'm not. We all have fear, but I do believe that you can fear less. And I do believe that if you can take fear out of the equation, even a little bit, it enables you to think more clearly, make better decisions, and in some small degree feel like you're controlling something that is uncontrollable. So for me, I learned to not be afraid to ask for the help that I needed. This is a difficult thing for a lot of us. If you're a successful professional or you have a family, you're used to taking care of other people. So I decided to not be afraid to ask for help, and I called in every favor. I told people I need a ride to chemo on Wednesday. On Thursday, I need somebody to prepare dinner for my family. Friday, I need some exercise. I need you to come over and go for a walk with me. And Saturday, I need to be alone. So by taking control of this, by recognizing my strengths and where I needed help, I've been able to stay strong through this and fear less. I got married last summer for the first time. And I was 4 months into my marriage when cancer came to crush me. But it didn't. And it won't. Thank you.
Jennifer, can you share with us a little bit about where you write and what you do on social media?
Thank you. Well, I was very fortunate. I made this video in New York last spring at a speaker training program I was on, and it was shown at the end of the course, and in the room was the editor-in-chief of Parade magazine. She saw it and asked me if I'd write a column for Parade for their health section, which I do now, which many of you have seen, that is called At the Top of My Lungs, Living with Lung Cancer. It's been very gratifying and important to me for many reasons. Neil, what you said about how this experience brings things to the surface that were in us already, but come out from this. And so I've always loved to write. For me, writing about the cancer was essential in a therapeutic way. Before I got the column, I was keeping a journal and I was writing on Caring Bridge for friends and family. And I think for many people, it's very helpful to find some creative expression, if it's writing or painting or cooking or gardening, some way that you can get your head out of the immediacy of it and just create something. It also, almost in juxtaposition to that, made me go deeper into the experience and really forced me to observe what was happening to me, going to radiation every day for 7.5 weeks. I'd be tempted to lie there and think, okay, what do we need in the fridge and what do I have to get at the grocery store today? But I thought, I need to write about this today. What is interesting? What is funny? What is heart-wrenching about what's happening to me today? And so I wrote all this stuff down, and now I have it to look back on, so I know what the experience was. It's life-altering for all of us, and it goes by so quickly, and there's such a blur of new information. I'm very happy to have that chronicle. The feedback I've gotten has been terrific. The main outreach that I use is, many of you are on my email distribution list. If you're not, please contact me, give me your email, get a card from me, or send me a note, and I'll add you to my list so you'll get my columns emailed to you when I post them. And I also have a very active community on Facebook. What has been very interesting is with whom it resonates the most. Of course, you'd expect people who have lung cancer to be affected by this, then the greater community of friends and family and caregivers, people who are affected by it in that way. But some of the most touching comments I have gotten have been from people in the medical community, back to what we've been talking about patient advocacy and giving ourselves a voice. I think my column gives a voice and puts a human face, and I send it to the people who worked with me on radiation and my oncologist and his team. And just a month ago, I got an email from one of the doctors in my oncologist's office saying, she said, I'm sitting here with tears in my eyes. It's so revelatory to understand the patient perspective. So my request to all of you is, if you can please help me, if you read it and if you like it, please help me send it to people who would be interested, to your communities, to other people who may have cancer, and most particularly to your caregivers and your doctors. And if you're not comfortable approaching them, just tell me how to get in touch with them, and I will do it. Through doing the column, I've been approached by a number of healthcare publications to write for them, and it's happening incrementally, bit by bit, that I think I'm able to expand the voice, but I'd love your help to reach more people with this.
And to everything Jennifer just said, I watched her video a long time ago. It made me cry, make me cry again. Just last week, I was able to speak in front of the AACR and the IASLC. I know that's a lot of acronyms. It's the American Association for Cancer Research and the International Association for the Study of Lung Cancer. But I brought 2 patients with me. I brought Emily Bennett, who is a young 28-year-old, also newly married patient, and Natalie DeMarco, who belongs to Terry Fry back here. And the room was full of clinicians and researchers and people that work in the labs that never meet patients. And some also VIPs, in the medical world. And they both stood up there and told their stories. You could hear a pin drop in the room. Natalie told everybody, that, she had her 2 little children and crushed by this stage 4 diagnosis along the way, and told them all at the end that even though she was NED right now, no evidence of disease, that she had a ROS1 marker in her back pocket, and she was planning on using that at some point in time, or hopefully not. But she challenged them and said, a cancer patient always needs a plan B. That will let us sleep. If all we have is plan A, we can't sleep. And she said, I have 2 babies and I need my sleep. So they were all very quiet.
She was great. She said, don't tell me we'll cross that bridge if and when we come to it. I want to know that if and when we get to it, we have a plan.
Right, we have a plan. And then Emily got up and told her story. And she's marker negative, which means she has none of the known markers, not even KRAS or what have you. And somehow she's managed to be NED at this point in time. But she challenged everybody in the room to find a marker for her in case she needed it somewhere down the road. We had so many people come up to us after that. I got to tell our story about what we're doing here at the foundation and, doing some amazing things. People were just covering us, and we were invited to go to multiple more meetings, including around the world. The lab people never see the patients. This brought it home to them. I have a slide on my presentation, which is a microscope, and I always show this at the very end. And there's a clinician looking through the microscope, but on the slide is the face of a patient, one of our real patients here in the room. And I said, now, when you go back to your labs, don't forget, that's not a piece of tissue or just a blood drop. That's a patient that wants to live, and we're counting on you to make that happen. And they were all like, holy shit, you know?
Yeah, and trust me when I tell you, we had been sitting in these meetings for a couple of days and through several different sessions, and the only session that got the response where people were coming up saying, tell me more, I need to know more about you, I need you to come here, here, and here, it was yet another indication is not even a strong enough word. It was proof positive how powerful your voices are.
And the impact
Yes.
your voices have.
On these people coming from some of the, I mean, they're some of the brightest and they're on the fast track to doing amazing things.
9 PhDs and all of those things. Let's not be afraid of them. Let's stand up for ourselves and get the treatment we need. The patient is the missing link. We are the solution. It's our blood, our tissue, our plasma that they use to find these drugs and to generate cures. But we are a huge part of the solution, and we can make the system better. We can make the whole system better.
And I think
by using all of the methods that you're talking about today.
I agree. And I think that is a perfect sort of segue into, we've had a couple of different examples or 4 different examples of what patients can do from speaking engagements, early detection, clinical trials, internet and social media, and really trying to push your story out there. And I think it's important that we hear from a caregiver's perspective, which is why we asked Jim to be here tonight, because the caregivers are such an important part of the big picture and so very often get kind of pushed to the background because, of course, what trumps cancer, right? So as the cancer patient, they're always seen as the ones who need to be up in the forefront. But there is a need, and there's needs on both ends, and they just happen to be different. But from a caregiver's perspective, Jim has been an amazing advocate for his wife. His daughters have as well, and not only an advocate in trying to educate himself on the disease, as I know, as I look around the room and I see several caregivers as well sitting here, have done the same. Jim, what has your experience been? How has Nita been able to benefit? What are your plans moving forward? What are some of the things that you worked with your girls in getting her the care that she needed?
I think specifically, I mentioned my 3 daughters, and we recognized immediately that we needed to manage the disease. We took the talents of our daughters. Laurie is the type of person just to devour the published information. Neil mentioned the clinicaltrials.gov. Lisa, who lives in Piedmont, would come over for all the meetings with Dr. Wakely. And then Nita in Hillsborough would always be there when we needed her and be very present. So each one had a responsibility. And each of you, you have people around you, whether it be family members or friends or whatever, who want to help you. And you have to ask them, though, because they'll be holding back and they'll be a little bit reluctant to do so, a little bit shy. But think about managing your disease, and then think about the talents that you need to help you. And they may be different from the ones we had, but consider that as you're the general, and then you're going to be able to parcel out these responsibilities to people around you who care about you. There's a lot more than what you realize. We go back almost 5 years, and it's almost like the Dark Ages now. But 5 years before that, God knows what it was like. But Nita was diagnosed. They said, well, we'll hit you with cisplatin and carboplatin and do our best. That's those who've had it know it's devastating. And then we're kind of thinking about something else. They said, well, Asian women respond to EGFR, but my wife's not Asian. So finally we got a mutation testing going, and bang, hit the jackpot. We had EGFR, but it was literally that hit or miss. And then basically Nita was on that, and it just did beautifully for 4+ years. And then basically the message is that it's going to run out. That at some point Tarceva no longer works. Sometimes sooner, sometimes later. And just to make a major point, parallel paths, plans A, B, C, and D. Always be thinking ahead of the disease, because it's virulent, it's mutating, it's changing, and it's trying to outwit the Tarceva drug or others that you're taking, and basically continue to do the research. In the 5 years it's changed. BJA, BJ Addario Foundation, has just done enormous things. The manual basically would probably cover the first couple of years of our questions we'd ask, and now the foundation has that available. Danielle and the people here, excuse me, they have personal contacts. And just to make a quick point, one of my closest friends in France, one of his friends is diagnosed with a stage 4 metastatic lung cancer. They can't begin to get any help. And they came to me, and Danielle knows the head of a major research lab in France who may be able to help this person. So that's just the extent of the contacts that they have here. And knowledge of patients. And then the library, the living room, is enormous resource too, these videotapes and so forth. Excuse me. Yeah.
That's a great commercial for the foundation, and I love it. And we'll actually carve that out and put it somewhere. But what about the caretaker? How about when the caretaker needs some tender, loving care? How about when the caretaker needs to talk about their fears, about possibly living without their partner, and all of the things that are rolling around in their heads? And they're not going to talk to the patient about it because they don't want to get the patient any more upset than they already are. What can we do for the caretakers, that are living their lives and are scared? And
I think the people that are, excuse me, a touching subject. I mentioned, managing the disease and assigning responsibilities. These people who are part of your team, they have to be told also that they're there to help you too, because there's only so much you can do by yourself. So that team is not just a one-way team going down. This one is coming back too, because there's time you need to talk to somebody, and the excuse me, the caretaker needs to talk to somebody. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. And the people, they're living this process with you. They're the ones you really need to go to, because strangers or people only peripherally involved, they look, oh, this type of thing. But people who are living with you, they are there to be called on also. So,
are you saying it's okay to talk to your spouse and your kids and whatever about your feelings too?
Yes, I think the person who has, the people here who have lung cancer, they're living it every day. There's times to talk to them about your needs. There's times not to. And it'd be since when they're feeling strong and on top of things, you just talk. But remember, we're here to take care of the cancer patient. And if we can get something back in return, that's great. But always keep focused on the cancer patient. And as a caregiver, we will have our moments when people will step up and say, how you doing? And you'll be able to talk to them about it. So it's easy to get distracted about yourself, but you've got to stay focused on the cancer patient.
But it's okay to be distracted and talk to your friends and other people.
And it is, and that's a whole, and like I said, when we kind of first started with the introduction to Jim, and like there's the cancer patient need, and then there's the caregiver need, and they're two completely different sets of needs, right?
Let me just say one thing to finish my prepared remarks. This disease is not static. It's dynamic. It's changing. It's virulent. It's destructive. Its goal is to kill the person who has it. And it's going to take, the caregivers, the patients, all the people who thought this was here have got to be mounting a very complex attack on this disease as it changes and mutates and so forth. So anyway, what you call parallel plans A, B, C, and D, it's almost 24-hour vigilance. And we're fortunate to be so enlightened with people here who are now doing it. And all the opinions offered here, these people are all fighters and are working to basically overcome their disease. And God bless everyone.
So, Jim,
Yeah.
that was awesome. I just want to ask one question because I think it's a struggle for a lot of people who are a loved one or a caregiver or whatever. Where do you see, as you know, sitting in that role, where do you see the most benefit? In other words, where do you feel that you can help the most?
I think every caregiver has to look at their talents and what they can bring to the person who is the focus of attention, the person who has the cancer. I happen to be a marketing and sales strategist and pretty disciplined in my organization structure, so I talk about structural things, and then getting those things working together. Other people are purely on the emotive side, and that's a tremendous role for someone to occupy also. So I think look at the talents within yourself, and then look at the needs, and then try to match those things up. If I answered your question.
You did.
Okay.
You did. So we've got about a half an hour left, and there's a couple things that I want to open up to the panel as well as to some of the people in the room, and whoever feels comfortable enough to answer. But there's some things that have come up, over the years that I thought would be important to bring up today. So the first question is, if you could change your relationship with your physician, how would you change it, and what would that look like? If anybody wants to take it on the panel or in the room. Or everybody's perfectly happy with the relationship they have with their physician because it's so communicative and they respond exactly how you'd like them to. Does anybody have any comments about that? No? Everybody's afraid to say anything.
I think one of the things.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
Well, no, I think one of the things that you would find, because of who you have up here and how they have expressed themselves, is that if that were the case, that person would no longer be seeing that doctor. And if he or she wanted to see someone else, they would immediately, and they would go to wherever. Perhaps it's Dr. Gandera, perhaps it's Dr. Dormady, Dr. Wakely, Dr. Neal, or whomever. They would travel to wherever it is. And I think it's an important point because it is our place to ask the questions, to, if necessary, put the person on the spot. And I love it that my doctor will say, I don't know, but I will find out. That gives me so much confidence in her that, I happen to be 100% satisfied in my treatment. But you can be sure, and I know Elizabeth and Jennifer and Sally would feel the same way, Anita, we're going somewhere else if they are, as you say.
But I think, I don't think we need to like our physician. I don't think we need to love them. I don't think we need to want to go socialize with them on the weekend. But I think we need to trust them. I think we need to have a really good faith position that we're in there, when we're in that room with them, that they are giving us all the information that's out there to get us to the best place we can be.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, in talking with patients all around the world, a lot of them will have concerns, and it's usually, and I guess that's the message that I'm trying to get relayed here. And Neil, you said it beautifully. If you have concerns about your doctor or what he is or isn't telling you, it's okay.
Go ahead. Sorry. Sometimes, having been the caregiver for my mother adored her doctor. I couldn't stand the man's personality because I asked after my mother's first surgery what about the prognosis and when we'd find out the results of the biopsy. And I said, my sister who lived in another state, I said, we want to know this. And he turned to me and he said, go home and stick to cooking your chicken soup. My mother adored this man, and I didn't tell her this for years, but when her cancer came back and she had needed a second surgery, I did tell her. And I said, I wish you'd find another doctor. And she loved him. And she sat there with me sitting there and told him that I had not been happy with what had happened before. Then he became very condescending to me, which I didn't like either. But it's finding a doctor that will be equally as open and discuss things with the caregiver as they do with the patient. And it made it very difficult. I think it's far harder being the caregiver. I've said that.
But it's very personal. You and your doctor and your family and your doctor, it's very personal. We all resonate with different people and different things and different, so you have to know personally, how do you feel? Do you have faith in this person? Do you trust them? Do they, when you call on a weekend, does their office at least get back to you within the hour? There's a lot of parameters.
So that brings a couple of comments from online. One, Natalie wants to be allowed in the tumor board room, which we did have some discussions about. And some places are actually doing that. And someone else had the ability to reach their doctors by email, and I know some docs are more open to that than others. And I think this kind of boils back down to, again, standards aren't set, right? Like, why can one patient be allowed in their tumor board here, but not over here? And I think it's all part of the process in trying to create not only medicinal standards of care across the board for and clinical pathways for lung cancer patients, but also sort of a patient-physician expectations, right? But I think those are things that maybe you can talk to your physicians about up front.
I think we, and this isn't a commercial again for our foundation, because other foundations do this as well and other entities. I think one of our purposes here is to teach you what's going on out there in the world about lung cancer. We just got back from a meeting in San Diego, and there's two very promising things. Well, there's three promising things out there: immuno-oncology and two other drugs by two major pharmaceuticals that are in clinical trials that look very promising as well. So our job is to go out there and tell you what's happening so you can go back and say to your doctor, I just heard about X, Y, or Z. How does that look for me? Is that an opportunity for me? And if they embrace your knowledge, if they embrace the fact that you're going out there and learning about this, then I would think you're pretty much in a good place. Mm-hmm. You don't have to like them. You don't have... Terry?
The experience that we've had, now granted, we're into this 4 years, so obviously our relationship with Natalie's doctor has developed over the 4 years. But I think initially a doctor comes into a patient and in most scenarios feels like they're the lead. And over time, basically after meetings and meetings, it's developed into that we're a team, and actually Natalie's the lead. We go to the meetings, we ask questions. The Dr. Wakely will give us answers. If she doesn't know, she'll go research it. We'll come with, she expects questions. A lot of questions. And at first she was a little defensive, but over time she realized that we're all in it for the same reason. And basically, though, it always boiled down to Natalie's decision. And sometimes during our meetings, we will leave Natalie's posse, and mm-hmm. Natalie will have a one-on-one with Heather. But it's grown to the fact is now we're all going after the same goal, and we're all basically the team. And actually, Natalie is the lead of the team. And so, but it didn't happen at first, but it develops over time. But once a doctor realizes that you're still all in it for the same reason, and the expectation is basically all, on the same goal, you develop a really good relationship. At least that's what we've done.
And I think, one message you all have to leave with today is that lung cancer has become very personal and very individualized, much like some of the other cancers, which is really bravo, good news, because 10 years ago that wasn't the case. As Neil said, it was carboplatin Taxol, or somebody said that, and that's actually what I had 10 years ago. And there wasn't anything else. And it is it is becoming more and more personal as the days go by. And you have to ask your doctor, is this the most personalized choice for what I have, for my cancer, and for my molecular targets, and everything that's going on with me? And it can be personalized to your age, other things that are going on with you. You might have another disease going on at the same time, and they might put you on one drug or not another because it might be too toxic for you with multiple, but it's personal. So you have to find somebody that is willing to treat you and your personal lung cancer. You don't need Jennifer's treatment, and you don't need Elizabeth's treatment. And you don't need my treatment. You need your treatment. So I think that's one thing that you have to know when you're seeing a doctor, that they're looking at you personally, and they're looking at all the parameters of your case, and they're treating you individually.
Another online comment about the physician question is, I wish oncologists were better equipped to offer suggestions to manage side effects to treatments. Sometimes I feel we find the solutions online and then bring them back to the doctor. And I think that's a really great sort of segue into the role that foundations can play, and the role that what Jennifer's doing on the internet and blogging about her experiences for other patients to go back and read can play. Is that, when we're looking at realistic, timelines for medical oncologists, they're seeing X amount of patients a day. They've got X amount of time to sit with you. Sometimes they are standing back and answering these questions, which is why you're sitting in the waiting rooms for 2 hours waiting for your appointment, right? So I think it's yet another gap that we're slowly filling, that Jennifer's slowly filling with things like she's doing on the internet, and in really being able to push that information out to the patients.
I was going to say, the relationship with the oncologist is so important. And let's dwell on for just a minute. Ours, we've been working with almost 5 years, and it's always been there. And that person is outstanding and wouldn't change a thing. But I try not to get that person to go beyond what his or her real talents are. After 4 years, you really see what the strengths of a person are. And if there's a little bit of something around the edge that's missing, go find it. Go talk. Go talk about a clinical trial, or go talk about a different research project or whatever like that. But you can work around that, bring that back, and then entertain, have a positive discussion with your oncologist. I found about this, get their opinion. So, not to replace your oncologist, but to complement your oncologist. So,
Evie.
Yeah, I want to talk from the caregiver's perspective. And I mean, first of all, when cancer happens to someone in your family, it doesn't just happen to that person. It happens to the family. It happens to you. Yeah, it's not in your body, but it darn well is in your head all the time. And one of the challenges as a caregiver that I've found is when to ebb and when to flow. And what I mean by that is Neil's level of comfort is different than my level of comfort. I need a lot more questions answered. If I see a symptom, I want to get on the phone. I want to call that doctor right away. He's not like that. So you have to be able to come to a kind of a conversation with the patient as well. Because you can't be the best caregiver that you want to be if you are feeling that you need some questions answered. And so it's almost, it's an opportunity for you to learn about communication. Communication is an ongoing thing if you're married, if you're not married, if it's your parent, if it's your child, or whatever. Cancer just puts another spin and another level on that communication. But it's really, really important so that you can both walk through it and have a level of comfort. And obviously, a lot of times, it's not possible to get there, but it may be possible to get a little bit farther down the road. And then the other thing I'd like to say as a caregiver is that, and also, we talk about patients as being advocates, but I think that patients are teachers. And I think that caregivers are teachers. And I know that every opportunity I have, I talk about what I'm learning from this experience. And, maybe that's just the way I'm built and I like to do that, which I do. But people aren't mind readers, and doctors aren't mind readers. And if you don't say something, they ain't going to know. And so I think it's really important that you tell people what it is, as we've already said, what it is that you need, and don't be shy about that, and open up some windows for the the doctors, the clinicians, whomever, so that they're not just looking at people as a slide, but they're looking at them as people.
Well, sometimes it's what you don't say, too, when you're in the doctor's office. We had a patient that we're involved with just a few weeks ago that was visiting with their oncologist and ended up in the emergency room at home, which was like a 40-mile drive from the oncologist to home, and failed to mention that they had a real serious pain in their tummy. Thought, well, it's probably gas or something. I don't need to mention it. So tell it like it is. Be open, Neil. Tell your doctor what's going on, what needs to, because they're not mind readers, and
Right.
they need the full story so they can give you the full service.
The other point I'd like to make, I guess, is that I think that how one deals with the medical establishment is a learned behavior, and it starts as a child.
With your dad.
And in my house, you sneezed and you had to go see 3 specialists. And in my husband's family, you broke your arm, go out and play, honey, it's fine.
Right.
So, we have different learned behaviors about how we approach the medical establishment.
Right.
So I think, that's kind of an interesting thing you might
Right.
think about.
Right.
So true.
Yeah. We wouldn't think twice about buying a car, and if it broke down 3 days later, bringing it back and saying, fix this car or I'm not going to buy it. But we're a little more hesitant when it comes to a doctor because we put them on a pedestal. We put them, above us. We put them, in a different place. And yes, they know more sometimes, not necessarily all the time. But we're there. We're paying good money, really, really, really good money to get the best treatment, and we deserve to have the best treatment.
Bonnie, I think what you were saying about, I think it's absolutely key factor that when you're working with your oncologist and when you're trying to decide on an oncologist, whether it's a good or bad thing when you're first diagnosed, it's a very emotional process, and you really want to rely on this person. And I think the thing is that you really need to be somewhat objective or have someone else there that can be objective for you, because you really do need to focus on what is in your best interest. So that if you have an oncologist, for instance, and you ask questions, and if they get defensive, or if you bring up things like molecular and genetic testing and they're very resistant against it, or it's not the way that I do thing, or I only, adhere to standard of care, if they're really threatened by that, you should take note and start asking questions, because they're not necessarily, they may be well-intentioned, but they may be operating within their own comfort zone. And unfortunately with lung cancer, you really have to push the envelope with this, because there's so much that's unknown. The standard of care just isn't good enough for what we have. And so you really need to be able to feel comfortable with challenging your physician. So when you're looking for an oncologist, you need to be mindful about that if you feel like you're being disloyal to your oncologist, that's a warning signal, because they should be comfortable with you asking to get a second opinion. And if you get that second opinion and they bring up something that's different, they should try to be open with that, because with cancer, it is such a growing and quickly growing environment. You have to be flexible, and an oncologist has to be flexible to respond to that and give you the best quality of care. So that's really from my perspective, because actually I started one place and I ended up at a second place. And it wasn't because the oncologist was good or bad, it was our styles were different, but I wanted somebody. I was recently married, like a number of other people here. I I was in my 40s, and I wasn't ready when they started talking to me about palliative care. I was like, wait a minute, I've got too much living to do. I want to push the envelope, and I want to be more aggressive than maybe this physician was comfortable with. And so those are the sort of things that is very personal sort of thing that you need to kind of touch base with you. And again, not just accept what the doctor's saying, and especially with this organization here, they can be such an invaluable resource for you to be able to know what type of questions to ask or where to go, and even just get pearls of information. Even if you don't understand it completely, you can take those questions and ask the doctor. And if they're really threatened about that you should take note of that.
And, if you're too shy, and that's okay because people are shy and, uncomfortable with that, let your family do it. I can sit here and tell you that I would go to see the oncologist, and my family all came with me, and they wouldn't let me talk. They just, fired out stuff. They were even, my husband was telling the doctor, he was correcting me if the doctor said, and how are your bowel movements? Are those okay? And I go, oh, they're fine. And he goes, no, they're not. I'm going, oh my God, I can't believe he's even doing that. So if you're embarrassed or you don't want to, talk, let your family do it. Let your friend do it. Bring somebody with you that will ask those questions and is not afraid. That's a great escape, to get around it.
So I think we've covered some, but not all. So what we're talking about is how do we move the needle forward? How do we make effective changes so that outcomes are better for patients who are currently living with the disease and those to be, diagnosed tomorrow? So we've run through clinical trials and the importance of participating in these trials so that we can move the trial process along faster. Right now, there's 4% of patients actually participate in clinical trials. Jennifer's talked a little bit about telling your story over the internet, getting involved in either blogging and or writing articles for online communities such as Parade. Sally's talked about the importance of early detection. Jim's come to it from a caregiver's perspective and what role the caregiver plays in helping this. And Elizabeth, of course, came to it, started us off talking about speaking to industry, giving the patients a voice. What I'm going to bring it back around to right now is one more piece of this puzzle that's really, it's always really uncomfortable for me to talk about. But it is a reality, because the reality is if we don't fundraise and we can't get the research, can't help pay for the research that needs to get done for these breakthroughs to be made, they're not going to happen. So I'm gonna at some point, actually right now, I'm gonna turn this over to you and to the question that you ask people all the time about the $20. Like, do you think there is a donation too small? Do you realize the impact that $5, $10, or $20 actually has in the big picture? Because it's so important. And all of you in the room at some time or another have been more than amazing and over the top, whether it's through one of our events in creating a team, or through in-kind donations and connections that you've made with outside organizations to us. So I'm gonna.
Okay, this is for people in the room, but people that are online and listening too. I remember when we had our first gala, and obviously it was a fundraiser, and we sent out the invitation, and it said, platinum, silver, bronze, whatever, and platinum, you write a check for $10,000 and on down to other. Well, I didn't like the other. I really didn't like the other because I think other just means you don't count. So we changed our whole process of doing this, and I happen to think other is more important than platinum, because my goal is $20 from 1 million people. That's $20 million a year we would have to really focus on some major research, to move these drugs along, to really make things happen. And $20 is 4 Starbucks. It's not a lot of money, but when you put all those 20s together, they're a huge amount of money. And that's my mantra. I don't want people to think their $20 doesn't count, because $20 is more important than 10,000. Because we might find 10 people that want to give us 10,000. That's $100,000. That's not chump change. That's good, but $20 million is more. And I want you all to just remember, $20 goes a long way, and anything you all can do out there to, help the effort, because it's for you. The funding for breast cancer is, for every $18 that goes to breast cancer, $1 goes to lung cancer. Lung cancer is the biggest cancer killer, and God bless the efforts the breast cancer people have made, and the prostate people have made, and the colon cancer people have made, because the survival rate for early stage breast cancer is 98%, per Nancy Brinker. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. Colon cancer is in the high 80s, and prostate cancer is 99%. Funding. That's the message. And it's going to be our voice. I think one of the reasons we have so little funding for lung cancer is because our survival rate is so low. But we have to get it up there, and it's a vicious circle. It's a vicious circle.
And when you look at, this is going back to how we sort of started this whole thing with the patient voice and how important it is, right? Lung cancer historically hasn't had the patient voice. There's nobody marching down the streets talking about the injustice, because sadly, especially up until the last 5 years, there was very little to offer a lung cancer patient, right?
And not a lot of lung cancer patients running, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, right?
Yeah, so.
Bonnie, is it important to say what that $20 will equal to someone out there? Like you had recently, the foundation did an ask for money that's specifically, I think, $25 for the patient education handbook.
Right, exactly.
So is it important
yes.
to be able to do that,
Yes.
to equate it to something tangible?
What $20 can do, a patient handbook, and not just ours. There's others out there too, although I think, ours is more than wonderful. That we give those books out for free. We don't charge patients for those books, and we get them into their hands all over the United States. We're sending them to major institutions, and they're getting into patients' hands. $20
for T790,
right?
For the
a cheek swab for the T790 mutation could potentially, help a patient get onto the right drug.
a petri dish in a lab,
Right.
although it's probably only a $2 thing,
right.
and they're charging $50. It's,
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But $20 can make a difference. It really can in so many ways. For the T790 study that we're doing in Alchemy, I think the whole study is going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000. But if you look at that in increments of 20 to get to, that's 40,000 people. No, it's 20,000 people, right? It's 20,000. Thank you. My math. Need a calculator. Heavy. That's 20,000 people. Pay for the whole study. $20. So think in those terms. And our goal this year is, this came out of the doctors' meeting in November. We need an army. AIDS was cured because of smart patients. Patients that were empowered with information that went to Washington, D.C. and demanded funding from the government. And AIDS today is a chronically managed disease. So we need to be empowered patients. We need to be smart patients. And we need to go out there and get something done. But it's going to take funding. It's going to take a lot of funding. So I just want you to all think $20.
Bonnie, what do you do for fundraising other than the gala and the new guy?
We do the gala. We have a 5K run series across the United States. We raised, how much, Andrea, did we raise? There's our event person right over there. How much did we raise in 5Ks across the U.S.? $800,000. Now there's
tournament.
A perfect example of $20 because it's $25 to sign up for a run.
It's either 35 or Well, like last weekend, we had a 5K and a 10K, so it was more expensive to run the 10K than it was the 5K, so we're trying to get a little bit more professional at our run series, because the draw is to obviously raise money, but also to raise awareness. So with those runners that want to come in and participate just in the 5K, we're giving them some much-needed awareness at the same time. But then we have a golf tournament. We have a couple golf tournaments. We have our gala. We have little independent fundraisers and affiliates across the U.S.
We have affiliates that have burgers and bubbles parties for their birthdays for us, but they all count. Those are all beautiful things. We have a little guy that's a little young boy who's raising money for us. You know, those
we
are
have
pennies.
Pharma. Danny works with pharma and industry on funding as well.
For our programs, yeah. And
Right.
What was that?
So
Yeah.
for our programs and
For the
services
programs,
and
yeah.
research, yeah.
Yeah.
And our
Right.
family foundations,
Yes.
Yes.
corporations, and then
Yes.
we have Evie, who's our secret.
She's right, writing grants.
Evie is our secret tool in working very, very closely with Danny and the rest of the team to do some grant writing, as well as help us with some of our external communications. I think she's done.
If I can interject something. Speaking as a marketing sales strategist, if you look at really sophisticated, successful campaigns for small amounts of money, I look at the Wounded Warrior Project. Has these extremely compelling stories that are, nationwide TV, and they ask for $19 a month.
Right.
That's $240.
Exactly.
And just a couple comments. First of all, they're very powerful stories, and we have no less a powerful story, if not
Exactly.
more so.
Exactly.
Two, it's a very efficient medium. They go out to a lot of people.
Right.
And so they don't
Right.
spend $140 trying to raise 20.
Right.
It might be worth considering creating an ad as persuasive and compelling, put it on a regional basis, see what kind of response we get, and then go national. Because, there's enough material and passion and need here that we just might hit a home run.
Well, and to that point, Jim, I'm actually, this wasn't part of the agenda tonight, but I'm going to put out the ask because it's something we've been talking about internally for anybody who's interested in doing either a written and or a video presentation telling your story so that we can use it and push it out to some of these people that we are trying to get some of this fundraising from, because again, and going back to, you have no idea how powerful your voices are. Please email me, because I'm happy to to work out some of the.
And even if it's a montage of just a couple seconds of, doing something on an iPhone, do it. We can upload it, and we can there's lots of things we can do. But the purpose is to make this disease real to people.
Yes.
And the only way we can make this disease real to people is through your faces and your voices. Then it becomes real. It's not just some kind of smoker's disease, where people are sitting in a corner and they're just like puffing away and yeah,
It's terrible.
Danielle, when you
Yeah.
mentioned about the relationship with AIDS in the fight there, many people will say that it was Elizabeth Taylor
Yes.
and Magic Johnson who, when they came out with their celebrity, helped change it. And there was an organization already in place, because AIDS was considered primarily a gay disease in this country, that helped really ramp it up, along with getting chained to the White House fence, et cetera. And it may be, for all of us who try to make videos and do the best we can, it may take someone of extreme celebrity and notoriety to coalesce to the next level, to allow all of the efforts that this foundation and every other one is doing and continues to do, to bring it past the stigma effect and get it to the next level.
I think it's twofold, Neil. I think it's what you're saying is true. I think celebrity would be an amazing asset to trying to get the word out. I think quicker. I think part of the problem in some of the celebrities that we've spoken with has been they're fearful of coming out, because they are seeing the statistics and maybe they don't have a target, and maybe they're concerned that if their agent finds out that they have now been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, they aren't going to get booked for the event 18 months out,
They're
or
not
for
gonna
the
be
filming
getting re-upped
18
for
months
their
out,
show
you know?
because they're afraid they're going to die midstream.
And that's a truth. That's actually come
We've heard
from
that. Yeah.
celebrity.
Yeah, from Catherine Houston from Desperate Housewives.
I'd like to just bring up also your Jill's legacy that's
Yeah.
getting the word out to young people. And a perfect example was when we were having the walk a couple of years ago, still in Golden Gate Park, and I was signing people up in sweatshirts and so forth. And these two young gals came up. They just happened upon the race, or the walk, and they asked me about it. And they said, well, what do you mean? People get lung cancer and they live? We thought everybody died. And I said, look around it. There are a lot of young people just like you. And so I thank you for having Jill's legacy, too, to get the word out to young people that it can happen to anybody, regardless of their age.
Well, and Emily Bennett, she tells this, and in fact, I think she told it in the gala video about she became aware serendipitously of Jill's legacy through a friend of hers who had participated in one of the jail runs, or the San Francisco one, I'm not really sure which. So when she became symptomatic, it was what kind of went through her head and made her go to her doctor and say, no,
She demanded
I
a
need
CT
you
scan. And he
to
said,
look
"You're
at this
crazy. You don't
because,
need a CT scan."
yeah, and it turned out she was, stage 4 lung cancer. But she said, had it not been for her knowledge of Jill's story and Jill's legacy and all the work that they were doing, she never would have pushed her doc to even, take it any further than Claritin, right?
But the bottom line is,
Yeah.
our patients are doctors and lawyers and plumbers and moms and dads and brothers and aunts and uncles and people that are just like us. We're all in this together. Celebrities, not celebrities. This isn't people hiding in a corner, sneaking puffs off of cigarettes. These are real people that are living real lives that deserve to live a long, long time.
Part of it, too, is actually making it relatable. There are two aspects of it. You do want the celebrity, but at the same time, you want people that people relate to, and they're like, oh my God, they're just like me.
It could be anyone.
And exactly, literally
That's
bringing
the
it
point,
home that
yeah.
it could be you, because that was
Right.
me. I mean, I was a non-smoker, I was healthy, I was a runner, skier, everything. Ate right, did all the right things, and then
Right.
when I had my diagnosis, I'm like, you're out of your mind, this can't be me.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and
'Cause
when
you
I've
didn't
met
know.
people and talked to
Yeah.
people about it, that's a reaction. Well, that can't happen to me. The first question I often get is, did you smoke? Did your parents smoke? Absolutely not. And then I tell them my story, and they sit there with their mouth open. And I think that's just part of it, that every single one of us, by telling that story, and unfortunately making people realize that this indeed could happen to you. I mean, we don't want to scare people, but at the same time, we want to get it away from this connection to smokers. So,
Evie?
Echoing on that, you can do everything right and still not get the outcome that you want. And that's life. That's just the way. And if you don't accept that, you'll be a 6-year-old for your entire life.
Right.
But anyway, I just wanted to say, and I'm not an employee of the foundation. Yes, I volunteer, I'm involved, et cetera. But I'm a donor. And as a donor, and I give to a lot of nonprofits, I like to see how is the money used. And the Addario Lung Cancer Foundation kind of has set the standard for 90% plus of every dollar that a donor gives goes to programs and services. And that's extraordinary.
And research.
And research, exactly. Because lots of times, you give $1 and then maybe 50 or 60 cents goes to the program and the rest of it goes to admin. So that isn't the case with this particular foundation, and that's really a gold standard. And I think that so that people, if they can see their way clear to give $20 or $25 or whatever, it is really getting to the right place and it's being used in the right way.
Thanks, Evie.
That's true.
That is true.
That's true.
That's true. Does anyone else have any comments before we close?
Does anybody have, one comment that they think could really add to, because the whole purpose of this meeting was what can patients do to change the survival rate of lung cancer? What could patients do? We've heard of some examples tonight. Does anybody have anything else they can offer about what you could do to to change it
That we didn't think about.
that we didn't think about. What?
It was pretty much all been said. You never hear there'll be a great pearl of wisdom will come jumping out of something.
Well, you know, you might be very surprised at just telling one person. You know, I remember a long time ago when I was in treatment, and it was at Sequoia Hospital up here, and I was there a lot. So they had valet parking because the hospital's up on a hill. So I used to always drive my car, and I'd get out of the car, and the little guy was there parking my car. So finally one day I said to him, I said, "Do you wonder why I'm here so often?" Because he was starting to recognize me. And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "Are you a doctor?" And I said, "No, I have lung cancer." And he went, "Oh," you know. And I said, and I have a foundation, you know, for lung cancer, and I want $20 from 1 million people. Do you know what he did? He put his hand in his pocket, and he came out with like $11.71, and he said, "Here." And I said, "Oh, sweetie," and I rolled it up in his hands. I said, "After you get out of college, you get a job. You remember me and send me $20. But I mean, he was ready to give me everything in his pocket.
Yeah.
So you never know. You just never know.
You never know.
Make
who
it
you're
real.
sitting next to.
Make
who
it
you're
real.
talking to. Yeah.
Be real to everybody you talk to. Make it real.
That's true. Okay. Yeah, I think so. So before I say my thank yous, I want to I want to thank all of you for your participation, for being here, for making this matter not only for you but for the people that will come after you, because it, as you all know, it means the world to me and to all of us here at the foundation. So thank all of you. I want to back that up by saying I meant it. If you want to tell your story either in writing or on video, please reach out to me, because as you can see, we have some great video people here and some great help with editing if you need that for your story. It wasn't that long ago when I'd read off my thank you, to all of our sponsors, where we only had 1 or 2 names on there. And so it really kind of shows to who we all are as a group, because it's not just us or all the behind the scenes people or people at the foundation who make this happen, but it's all of you and all of the people who sign in from online. So I want to thank Biodesic, Celgene, Genentech, Lilly, Pfizer, Safeway Foundation, of course the amazing people from Penn TV, who I don't know if you guys have ever had a chance to actually meet or say hello to, but say hello to them. They literally come and start setting up here about 3 hours before the meeting, and take a peek in the back room, because Rocky's back there. He's probably dying right now that I'm bringing up his name. But if you want to say hi to Rocky, he's in the back. They really do. They come every month. Not just because they have to or because it's their job, but they really want to. So a big thank you to Penn TV and to Mark from Penn TV and his adorable daughter Lauren for driving to the office and picking up our food tonight.
Yeah, he walked in with the food tonight. They went and picked up the food.
They went and picked up the food.
Yeah.
And of course, thank you to the Office Bar and Grill for providing the food.
But thank you, most important. And I do want you to know, they out there, pharma, physicians, they are all listening.
Yeah.
They are listening, and they are responding, and it really is all a good thing. Yeah,
They're listening.
Yeah, they're listening, and they're starting to really understand that the patient's voice has been a missing component of survival, and they want to hear more. So it's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Lots of good new drugs on the horizon too, so that's also good.
Yep. So thank you all. Please
Give yourselves a hand. And folks up here.